Alrighty, let's get into it. So this session we're going to be looking at continuing last week's stream that was unfortunately cut short due to, let's say, security reasons. That works. Let's jump in and go a bit of an overview with last week's and then jump straight in. Alrighty. There we go. Hey Moody, how's it going? Let me do a thing. Here we go. That's one. What's the good word? How are you on this fine day in Japan? I don't know about where you're at. Hopefully it's good. Alrighty. So, let's have a quick look. So far, in this space, so we opened up the Mon SDK. We ported the materials from the last space. So we have our materials here. And we also added a custom skybox. How's the weather in Egypt then? It also explains that project you're working on, so that checks out. I think one of my favorite photos of Egypt is like seeing the pyramids behind the window of, I think it's a Pizza Hut or a KFC. It blows my mind. Most of my life, I just thought, because of all the photos that are taken of the pyramids is in the middle of nowhere. But it's kind of like Niagara Falls, where like every photo is taken from the same like 30-degree angle, because otherwise you'll just see casinos, mini golf, and haunted houses. So it's kind of interesting. All right. Let's get into it. Moody, any questions before jumping in? If not, we'll get into it. So we're actually going to be looking at this is where I left off last week, where it's like we're just about to get into the asset creation in Blender. So we've got our materials, we've got our skybox, and then we're just going to create our space. So for that, I kind of need to, because it's been a while actually. Let's look at our first space. How was your weekend? Do anything cool? What did I do this weekend? Late last week we had Golden Week in Japan, which is like 4 national holidays in a row. So most companies just give their stuff off the whole week. And we went up to an interesting Airbnb in Kobe that was kind of near a waterfall. So the waterfall was very nice, but the Airbnb was interesting. It was more like a homestay. So that was the thing. All right. So the main thing I'm looking at here is like the size of it. So basically sort of checking how long, because we want to make basically this space just in Blender. So look at the metal blocks there, the roof, some lines there. And the thing is also, because we're making it in Blender, we'll have a little bit more control over the UV map, which is actually really good skill to have. So I think that is one of the negative elements of creating a space purely in Unity with the basic primitives like the cube, the sphere, and all the rest of it, is you don't really have control over the UV. But in a 3D tool like Blender, Maya, 3D Studio Max, all the rest of them, you do have complete control over the UV if you want it. So that's really cool. So this is a 40 by 20 meter space. And 4.5, say? So let's do that. Quick interview. So, Blender, how do you feel about the current geopolitical situation? A summary of Blender. When you open Blender, you get these 3 assets. I usually will delete the light and the camera. I will pretty much always start pulling apart this cube as a starting point, but that's depends on the person. Quick overview of tools in Blender toolset. So Blender allows you to kind of set up the hotkeys and the controls per other application. So you can do, I think, like 3D Studio Max or Maya, things like that. I use Blender because if I'm watching a tutorial on Blender, it's going to be using all of the keys and hotkeys and settings that Blender would have. So I usually choose that. So let's have a quick middle mouse button. We'll do that. Orbit? Is that the word? We'll do orbit. Scroll will go in and out. Shift and middle will move it around like that. So those are your sort of baselines. A useful thing that I find a lot, because sometimes if you have a larger space, it'll get more complicated. So dot on the numpad, if you have one, will focus on the thing that you have selected. So that's pretty important. That's it. One of the biggest things that took me a while to get from how would you say it? From a 3D Studio Max. So before Blender, I started using 3D Studio Max a long time ago. I think my first 3D Studio was 3D Studio Release 4. It wasn't even Max back then. So a long time ago. But recently I found that Blender is doing really, really well, and Max is kind of, because it's owned by one company that owns half of them, it's getting a little bit less, what would you call it? Cool. But one of the big things coming from other platforms to Blender is the fact that each object has different modes. So object mode is kind of like a scene, and you can move objects around and stuff like that, but you can't edit it. So the faces and the polygons and stuff. So if you press tab, which will go do edit mode on here, so you can just bounce between tab, that's when you can start editing the asset. So you can grab a polygon, you can grab an edge, and you can grab a polygon, like that. Now, these are very common things, so I would highly recommend the hotkeys for this, which is 1, not on the numpad. Does it work on the numpad? Nope. 1 on the keyboard. 2 for edge, and 3 for polygon. Now, the next one, you can use these, so move, rotate, scale. But because these are very common, I recommend learning the hotkeys as soon as you can. So, let's go to polygon, vertex, because that's really easy. Click on that. If you click on something, so it could be multiple, could be whatever, and press G, that will be move. Now, it will move in a 2D plane from the angle you're doing. So as you can see, it's not really straight in what you might think. So if I press G and then X, Y, or Z, you can control it to one axis if you want. That applies to all of the following. So G is move. R is easier. That's rotate. So let's get 2 of those. So R, rotate on your angle. X, that's doing it that way so you can't see anything. Y, that works there. And Z, that works there. And the last thing is scale, which once again is S. Once again, scale. Scale will apply to what you've got up here. So you've got your sort of median point, your individual origins and things like that. So you can adjust that here. So if I just go scale, it'll sort of scale between the 2 points, the median point. But once again, you can go Y, X, and Z, which won't do anything there. So let's do this one. Scale Y. Not going to do anything. X, That kind of will and Y. Z, sorry. Yeah. Or just scale. So you've got that. So yeah, those are the keys that, well, we'll probably go through a couple, but I'll hopefully try and cover the other ones as well. So yeah, there's that. Another thing that took a little bit to get used to was if I select all of the objects here at this angle, I won't select this one. Because I need to put X-ray mode on, which is up here. I'm sure it has a hotkey Alt-Z. Blender's really good that it shows you the shortcuts on everything. So if you forget, it's pretty easy to find it. So go X-ray mode, and then you can select everything. So that's one thing that I use a lot. I probably should use or learn the hotkey for that. I don't. Should. So that's that one. So yeah, I think that's most of it. You are now a professional in Blender. Congratulations. So what else do we need to do? Now there are other tools. There's sculpting, and there's vertex paints and weight paints and all that sort of stuff. We're not going to do any of that because we're just doing basic modeling today. Let's do a quick overview of some of these tools because these are quite useful, and I use them with short keys a lot. So extrude. Let's grab a polygon and go extrude. Then you can sort of just extrude. Extrude, if you hold down this button, has a few different versions. So I'll kind of bounce between extrude region, extrude along normals, and extrude individual sometimes. So get on those. It sort of depicts what they do there, which is pretty cool. Inset faces. Hey James, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. Feel free to ask any questions if you come along. Blender is a thing. It is so good. It does so much. First day is a lot. So yeah, anyway, back to inset. That allows you to inset the faces like so. And a common thing to do with something like this is maybe if I press E, that'll do extrude, and then you'll have that sort of effect there, which is pretty cool. Then we have bevel, which is usually done on edges. Click the edges, and then like select the dot with left click, and then you've got that as well. So that's pretty cool. Now this one and extrude, all of these tools have the following, which I'm going to do. When I let go, this comes up, and it allows you to tweak kind of anything. So if I wanted exactly 35 centimeter bevel, you can do that. I can add 6 segments in there if I wanted to. I can change the shape, so it does some cool stuff like that. I can change the material index. There's a bunch of stuff. A lot of it I don't actually use, but it's there. So a lot of these I very hardly ever, once again, should know them, but don't. I do everything very manually, for better or worse. So we've got that. Let's get rid of that one. Okay, next one we have, what's that one again? Loop cut. Okay. So loop cut, which is Control R, will basically add a loop into an environment. The problem with this approach is you can click once and then hold, and then you can move that loop cut up and down, which is pretty cool. But if you use, let's get rid of this. Let's go back up to here and go Control R. You can use the scroll bar to sort of add how many you want. And let's say we do that. And then click down. We can move it up and down, which is pretty cool. And then let go. Oh, okay. You don't have to let go because you have to right mouse click to put it where you want. So one more time because there's a lot of things going on that one. Control R, scroll, hold down, and then right mouse click. No, that cancels it. How do I do it again? Hang on. Space. That's the one. So to close it, you need to press space. So one more time, final summary. Control R, find the loop that you want to do. Scroll if you want. I'll put them in there. Click once, go up and down, like so, and then space. Or right mouse click and then it'll go back into the center. So you can do that if you want. So that's loop cut. And then of course you have the options down there as well. What do we got? Loop cut. Okay, next one is knife or K. This one I use quite a lot actually. So basically, you can, if it changes color on certain things. So if it's on a corner, it'll be like a red outlined green dot. If it's on a line, the line will change color. And if it's on nothing, nothing happens, I guess. But this basically allows you to cut edges where you see fit. Once again, press space to close it. So press K again, and space. So you can do some really cool elements with that if you want to. You don't have to go on an edge; it can go anywhere, and it will be on the face that you do. It won't be through, so it's just the one face there. If you do want through though, you can. Let's get rid of those so it's easy to see. So I'm going to select some polygons, like yeah, let's do that. Those two. And the other option with this one is bisect, which will basically do a bisect across, like so. But it will only do it on the polygons that are selected. So if I select, if I go up here, select that one. Let's leave that one. So I can do that. Bisect again. Cut it across there, and you'll see that it's there. So yeah, very, very useful for sort of modifying your space and object to do the things that you want to do. So yeah, that's all the Blender I use pretty much. I'll use materials, I'll do some things in here occasionally, but for like let's say 80% of the time, no, because there's UV and rigging and stuff like that. Basic modeling, that's most of it. There are other tools like smooth and edge slide and things like that, but I very rarely use them actually. Sometimes I do, but they are there. Polybuild, there's other ones, spin, but to be honest, I never use them. Once again, probably should, never do. The thing is also a lot of the assets I build are kind of basic environments, so like they're very straight, like what would you call hard surface objects, and I think some of these ones are a bit less hard surface and more interesting. Okay, any questions? Thing is, there's a lag, so I have to wait like a little bit before I can do that. All right. So up here, and I can't get rid of it once I open it. It's kind of interesting. But there's a little arrow. Open that. I think N. Yeah, there we go. So this little arrow here, or pressing N, will bring up all of these options. Some of these options are not in the base Blender. Some of these are plugins that I've either bought or downloaded. So VRM for Blender is here. That said, I much prefer UniVRM. It's a little easier. But if I'm doing something quick, I might use this. So I think item, tool, view, create is not in there. ARP is not in there. That's Auto Rig Pro. So yeah, just those three: item, tool, and view. Excellent. Now I'm going to bring attention now to this one, because this is a big thing with Unity. Your object should always kind of be a 1-1-1. If you don't, or if it isn't, if your scale is 1-to-1 and the object scale is 1-to-1, when you import it into Unity, you will have less issues with light mapping and other things like that. So yeah, you want this to be 1-1-1, and the way to do that, if it's not, So you do that is you press Control A and apply transforms will come up. And the main one is scale, right? So if I do that, it'll go 1, 1, 1. When you export it, it'll be neat and tidy. I don't want to do that because I want to keep this as is. Because... yeah, reasons. Because I'm going to use this box as a base size for the 40 by 20 that we're going to do. So that is a common thing. You will see me do it a lot, especially before porting over to Unity. So heads up on that. The default cube is not 1 meter, it's actually 2. So you can see that. The location and rotation point is based on the pivot, which is there. If you do Control A, whoops, no. Small note, Control A only works in object mode, not edit mode. So it would work here, Control A. But if I go into edit, it doesn't come up. I don't know if you can hear me clicking the keyboard when I do that, but yeah. So Control A is a very, very useful thing for putting things into Unity. So I'm going to introduce that kind of early and again, so you remember it. Less issues later. Okay. The scene collection, these are all your objects. So let's do warehouse base. Let's do that. I highly recommend getting into the habit. I don't half the time, but naming things is important both in Unity and Blender. So otherwise, cube 1, cube 2, cube 3, cube 100 gets a little bit tricky to use. What else is there? Okay. More summary general things with Blender. Up here, you have a bunch of, let's say, work layouts. That's the only thing that's changing is basically how the thing is set up. And it has different windows because there are a lot. So I'll use the Blender ones usually. Once again, tutorials will use those. And Blender kind of has most of it worked out. The ones I will usually use, always layout for modeling. I don't use modeling for modeling, I just use this one. UV editing, we'll get into that later. Shading occasionally when I'm doing a material, but we'll go into that in a second. I don't use materials in Blender because I'm going to make a material in Unity, because Unity has its own way of doing materials. So if you want the best out of your materials, make them in Unity. We'll get to that. There's animation. I don't do that very often. Rendering. Blender has amazing rendering. Like, we're using cycles and EV. That's it. I don't do much rendering. I would like to, because it looks cool. So there's that. Geometry nodes, I haven't got into, really want to. This is like node-based math vector craziness. People are doing some really cool stuff with that. And scripting, which is, I think, yeah, Python. So you can actually create a lot of stuff with Python. Everything is controlled with Python. So, like, people are getting AI in here and stuff like that. You're getting some really interesting results there. But the ones I use are layout, UV editing mostly, and occasionally shading. That's it. We'll get to materials later. Alright, I think that's it. Next to your mode, you have sort of... Each mode has different menus. So this is where all your things come into. And they change. So a lot of these I use hotkeys for, but I'll try to introduce or remember to say which one's which. This is just animation, don't use it. And then over here you have a bunch of tools as well. We're just going to worry about this one, probably. Maybe this one and this one. So we've got warehouse base modifiers. So this is quite useful for mirror and things like that. We'll worry about that later. What do you call this one? Object data properties. So things like normals and stuff like that. And materials. And we can add some here. But we want to edit this first. So let's do that. Z is up, so that's 4.5. Y doesn't really matter, so let's do 40. No, I want to do No, I want this way to be 40. Cool. And 20. Excellent. Now you'll note, basically the 0 is this ground here. So I'm going to go G for up. I'm going to hold left control. Right control also works. Left control to snap. I can adjust the snapping like here. I think you'll have to affect the snap. Where's that? Never used it. I just use the normal ones. I'm sure it's there somewhere, but I never change it because it's the 0.5. We kind of need to move the Z up to there, which will be 2.25. Done. Now, as you can see, the scale is off, but this is sort of good. I'm going to... I also want the pivot on the 0, 0 as well. So this time I'm going to go Control A, all transforms. And you'll notice that the pivot goes down to the center. Because if I just do Control Apply Transforms Position, the pivot will go back to 0, 0, 0. Which is kind of my approach to it. You have this thing here, but I don't like it. Control Shift tap, yeah. Tap, as in select. What's tap? Okay. Now, in our warehouse, if we have a quick look at it, the roof is missing. So we're going to get rid of that. Or, what I'm going to do, actually, so 3 for polygon, select the polygon. I'm going to separate that. So right mouse click, down to separate, and go selection. And that will be a separate object. I'm going to go to object mode, and then rename this one. Like so. Tap button. So is it Control? Let's see. Control Shift Tap. Doesn't do anything. What do you mean? Okay. So with this one, what I'm going to do, press Tab to go into edit mode. Grab these 2 polygons. That one, and that one. And I'm going to go G and Z. Maybe about that. Maybe a little higher. There. Ah, gotcha. Okay. So we already have kind of our warehouse done. Now, another very important thing, especially with game engines. Game engines will always have one polygon visible and one polygon invisible. So you can see it this way and it's invisible this way. Now in Blender, because everything is visible, we need to go to this cool tool here, which is kind of like viewport stuff, viewport overlays, and then go to face orientation. And this shows you which face is visible and which one is invisible. So blue is visible and red is invisible. So if we ported this into our space and you loaded inside it, you wouldn't see anything, which wouldn't be ideal. I might even show you because it's actually a pretty important element. So I'm going to go export FBX. Go to my space, which I think is this one. Builds your second space, assets, assets, models. All right, so where's not one? Do recommend, pretty much always do this myself, do selected objects. And if it is not, what is it again? If it's not animated or rigged, I will apply a transform. So any basic object, I'll apply a transform. Usually this is fine, but sometimes there are problems. So I put this just to double confirm that the transform is applied. So it does the 111 thing. So let's go export. My second space. We have our model in here now. So now that we have a model, I can either drag it in like this, or I can just put it in the asset, and then it'll go back to sort of 0, 0, 0. So notice how you can see the space out here, but if you go on the inside, you can't see anything except the shadows. So to fix that, we can go X-ray mode, press tab, number 3, so we can select all the polygons. Go up here to mesh, normals, and flip. And then if you turn off X-ray, you can see that everything is red and the inside is blue. So if we do another export, and this is what I like about Unity, once you import it, it's all good. So we can now see inside, and we can see the other side. So there's that. Now the problem is we have the floor, so I'm actually going to get rid of that. Yeah, I'm going to move this slightly down. So let's go down. Just because. Let's put it 5. Now notice how up and down in Unity is a Y. Up and down in Blender is a Z. Yay. Ah, that one, right. Okay, you mean tab, not tap. Got it. That makes more sense. That said, they are also just there. So I just use that one because it's pretty quick. Snap's great. Proportional editing is also great. Won't worry about that today. I don't think we're going to need it. Okay. So we have our base polygon asset, and let's make it a bit more warehousey. So I can get rid of face orientation. We can worry about that later. So let's have a look. I'm going to get the base because I want to make some up and down elements. So let's do that with Control R or add loop. Scroll to add to. Space, no, click, space, or right click to make it where I want. Scale Z, so Z, scale S, Z, and then that. That works. Now I could extrude the metal in, but if I do that, it gets a bit weird at the bottom because you got the floor, right? So I'm actually just going to export or extrude the walls a little. And for this one, I want to extrude along normals. So just go like that and like that. Now I'm not worried about the scale because I want to put the scale here. So minus 0.1. Too small. 0.1. Minus 0.1. Yep, that works. Now, very interesting point, and this is another reason we apply the transforms. So notice how this length here is the same width on both. If I hadn't scaled it, this would be kind of higher, like longer, and this one would be shorter because this applies the scale thing as well. So if you get some sort of what would seem like warping with extrusions, make sure to apply the transform, and that will clean that up. Okay, so we have our wall. Is that it? That's kind of it. So we have our wall, we have our base. Let's get this in there, I guess. Now for that, let's add a box. So we're just going to add a cube in the middle. G over here. We can kind of cheat here. So let's go 0.1, 0.1, and then GZ to there. Now we actually want it kind of behind that because we don't want it to be kind of obvious. So let's GX, nope, GY. There we go. So kind of behind that a little bit. That should be good. Now, small note. Now this is me being very, very refined, but it's a good habit to get into. So for example, that polygon, and the bottom polygon will never be seen. So that's 6 triangles. So I'm actually going to delete them with the delete key. Now in this case, I want to delete the faces. So let's do that. Now the reason I do that is because you won't see the polygons in the space, but Unity will, and that will take some processing. Now, 3 polygons is not very many, but this bar is going to be across quite a lot of them. So I'm going to scale that up a bit. Like maybe that. Scale Z. Maybe... Once again, doesn't matter if they don't see it, but the poly count's the same, it's fine. Cool. That should do. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go to edit mode with tab. Once again, that's up here. Polygon, here, with the 3. And this way I'm going to make this one asset. So I'm going to go Shift D, not Control D, which kind of annoys me a lot, actually. But Shift D will duplicate an asset. X to move it across this direction. And then holding Control to snap. And then doing the same. X to snap to there. Cool. Done. Now you can see it pop out under the brick. Didn't think of that. So let's actually, let's do through this. Tab for edit mode. And then move that up. So GZ. X-ray mode. So you can see all of them. GZ. And put that up there. Cool. All right, so we have that. What else do we have? It's kind of it. Right. Oh, that's good to know. Did not know that ported to Unity, actually. That's really good to know. Let's do that then. Yeah, no, this is the second space. We're not going to do instances and prefabs just yet. But that's a very useful thing to know. New for me. I'm going to do that in the future. Yeah, that's a good thing to do, actually. Cool. Yeah, the polygon count isn't very high. So, for a 6 polygon asset, not going to really worry about instances. That said, if this was a complicated pillar, like what would you call it? Like a Roman inset pillar, which has a lot of polygons, instancing important, but I wouldn't worry about that for your second space. That's too advanced. That said, prefabs are very useful for that purpose where it'll think about it less. So we'll save that for the third space, maybe. All right. Let's confirm that the face orientation is right on those. Yep. No, I realize that. But for now, we'll leave it. Okay, I think, is that it? Wall, pillars, ceiling. Actually, we'll do that idea on this idea, because this is more polygons. So I think that's actually a good thing. We'll do it on the walls here. Okay, so. And I'm also kind of interested to see how that works. So let's move on to materials, shall we? Okay, so let's get rid of the face orientation, as that seems correct. I'm going to make some materials here. So double click on the material, call it brick. And do one more. We'll do new, and we'll call this one metal. I agree it's easy to teach, but when it comes to instantiated prefabs and you've never looked at Unity or Blender, it's a bit of a jump in regards to logic. That said, yeah, I'll put it in the gallery walls. Yeah. So, with this one, what I will do in Blender is, just so I can make a difference, is I'll put the base color to color. So I'll jump in like that. So the metal will be blue and the brick will be red. Now, applying this, I'm going to join these two. So select that, hold shift, select that, and you'll have your base space, right mouse click, and go join. That will be one object then. Yeah, let's do it with the roof as well. So in that case, we need 3 materials. So I'm going to put another one in there as well. What's this one? Roof. And let's make that one red. Okay, cool. So for the brick polygon selection, let's select all the brick. That's done. Now if I go Control I, it'll select everything else. So I'm going to make that metal, so assign. Now you'll notice that the colors don't change because we need to go up to a different viewport shading. So that's it there. So you can start seeing. So white is the brick, blue is the metal, and then if we select the roof, go assign. Done. Yeah, that's it. So, and that's all I do with materials in Blender. I will name them, because that will come over to Unity, so you know which is which. Assign them as needed. So, for example, you have your brick, your metal, and your roof, and that is it. Then I will export that into the scene with the assets. And sometimes it will do that. So, because we moved the pivot, I think. So I'm just going to delete that and then put it back in. Like so. And you'll note that Blender does bring in the colors. Now, if these had textures in the shading, those would be imported as well. But as you'll need to sort of remake these textures anyway, I don't even worry with that. I'll make these. Now, with our model, if I click the model, it has materials over here. And then I can drag these into them. So go apply. We've got that. We've got, what is it? I've got to do the floor. So there is 4, actually. Forgot about that one. Metal. Apply. Cool. And roof, which is the corrugated. There we go. Apply. Cool. Now, as you can see, all of the scales are way off. So we'll be looking at with unwrapping, but first we need to add a floor. So we need one more. And floor, sign, and let's make this green. Done. That's green. Go back to our model, materials, and then drag the concrete in to floor. Done. Now, all very big. So, let's take that to the next stage and do some unwrapping. So, unwrapping basically means we have a 3D object that we need 2D textures to be put on. Unwrapping just tells the asset how to do that. So if we go here and select all of the polygons, everything looks like that. So very big, not great, all the rest of it. For this purpose, let's go with just a quick smart UV project. And this also applies to the scale. So if you notice here, the scale is a bit off because we've edited it and joined things and things like that. So if I do, where is it? There we go. Tab, UV, Smart UV Project, and just go OK. It'll kind of be okay, but I'm going to go Control, Scale. So that squares up. Go back to Edit Mode, and then go Smart UV Project. And it'll edit some of these because the scale was off. So unwrapping with Smart UV Project also needs to apply the scale on the transform. So we've got that. So yeah. So you'll have this sort of element here. And these, because the apply transform has been done, everything is the same scale. So if I export that, I can show you what that looks like. Like so. So all of these materials are the same scale and to scale sort of thing, but the texture is very big in it. Now there's 2 ways we can do this. We could make this a lot bigger. That's one approach. Or we can just tile the textures in our materials. So I'm going to do that. So let's do maybe 10 by 10. Yeah, that works. Concrete, let's do the same, I guess. 10 by 10. 15 by 15. Yeah, that's better. Metal corrugated iron, let's go with 10 by 10. Yeah, that looks good. Now, the problem is, the bricks are facing the wrong way, and the corrugated iron is facing the wrong way. Concrete, I might put that at an angle. When you've got a tileable texture and it has like an obvious kind of pattern, one way on square floors is to sort of rotate it at an angle, and it's slightly less obvious. So you could do that. So we want the ceiling to be this way, and we want the walls to also be the other way. So I'm just going to rotate on this. Now notice if I do R over here, it'll do that. If I do R over here, it'll do that. So the hotkeys you press are dependent on the what do you call it? The window you're in. Now, in this case, because we're just using simple tileable textures, it doesn't really matter if they overlap. Yeah, this is less important, if that makes sense. If we were doing custom assets, say for example, a character or a vase with a very specific pattern, there's different approaches to materials. So the one we're looking at in this time is kind of using tileable materials on a simple asset. There's, what do you call it? One of my favorites, trim sheets, which I have a tutorial on in the docs, which uses the texture in really interesting ways to help with the modeling. And then you have, I don't know what the best word for it is, but custom UVs. So if you have a character, all of your asset needs to be within this thing, within this square, and like unique and things like that. So they get more advanced as you go along. But there are tutorials on all of those in the docs at docs.metaverse.com. So check them out. So we've rotated both of them, and we can export that one more time. And then you'll see it'll rotate. So I've got that and that. Now, how's the metal? This metal, still a bit big. So that's another, this one. So let's go maybe 15 by 15. Yeah, that looks good. All right. So we wanted to rotate that a little bit. So let's grab that, the floor. Let's rotate that like maybe about that. Cool. Now, as you improve and start understanding the process a little bit better, you won't need to go back and forth so often. That said, I'll do it a fair bit. So that's good. And with the walls here, that'll be even less obvious. So that's a good way to get it around sort of those sort of loops occasionally. All right, next one. Let's get to the gallery wall. So what's that? That's a 12. There we go. 12 by 3, say, with a thing at the top and bottom. All right. Ah, yeah. When you join things and one of the names has cube, that's why. And that might, small note on this, if you rename an asset in Blender, and I do recommend it because then, like, getting the original content in a good position just improves every step afterwards. So I'm going to change this. And when we export it, it might tweak a few things in Blender, but a good thing to do, I think. So I'm going to hide that, and then let's make our gallery wall. So I've got a cube. What do we have? So we've got 12 in the other direction, 0.2, 12, and that's a 3. Let's move that up. Using this gets around the different directions. You can use the numpad if you want as well. That said, I just usually use this. It's a bit quicker. Numpad's too far. Using left control to snap. Control A to do all transforms because I want the pivot to be at the bottom there. Let's Control R to get those two in there. Right mouse click or space to lock in. Scale Z to go up. Not too much though. That works. If you use, I think it's control, yeah. If you use control between two polygons, it will sort of find the fastest way to get there. So that's a good way to sort of select a lot quickly. We're going to use this one again, go in a little bit, maybe there. Minus 0.025. That's good. Done. This also has materials. So, one, we need white. So matte white. And then the other one is metal. If you click this, it will pull up all of the materials that you have in the space already. So we want that as to be metal, so I'm just going to do that. Control I to select the other ones, go metal, assign. Cool. Name it. So let's go gallery wall _1. All right. That looks good. Now let's do the shift approach that Moody was speaking on. So let's go G, X. How many did I have in the space? 1, 2, 3. Hide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay, so, what was it? Alt-D. X to snap. Five, 6, 7. So I'm going to grab both of those, move it up a little bit more so it's in the center. Alrighty, let's see how that goes. I'm going to separate... So, Moody, if I just select these, export these as an FBX, that will do what you say in regards to the instance. Let's find out. All right, so we have a gallery. We're going to drop it into our assets. We've got that. Let's have a look. Are you sure? Can I check that? That'd be interesting to see. Pardon me. Actually, on that, let's... Oh, that's where it is. So if I do... Okay, let's have a look. Base mesh, this one. Mesh. Ah, you're right. Okay, that's cool. So, expanding on what Moody's talking about, and it's a very good point. And it's a good way to check it as well. So, if you look at any model, you have the mesh. So, this button here, this one with a little line on the top, that is not the mesh itself. That is all of the things to do with it, if that makes sense. So, we have some materials here. We have the meshes, and we have this one actual mesh. So in this case, for example, we have the mesh there. If you're using a mesh collider, especially a custom one, this asset, not this asset is the one you drag into it. So we might look into that later, but we'll see. But yeah, so what Moody was saying is basically we've got a bunch of assets, so like 5 walls, but the mesh it's using is 1. Now, what this means is in memory, you'll have this, and it will just be smart about the polygons after that, if that makes sense. So, yeah, this is a really good way to optimize spaces with poly counts, but also, and this is news to me, get that from Blender. So that might save a bit of time. I'll probably use that in the future as well. Otherwise, the other approach is make one wall in Blender, and this is what I did in the past. Make one wall in Blender, and then make a prefab and duplicate it in Unity. So there's a couple of approaches to it, but yeah, this is the faster way. So I don't mind it. Thanks for that, Moody. Wrong one. Let's go back here. Okay, so let's go to our materials in this. Let's make the metal. Put that on there. And this is why the name in Blender is important. So you can very easily see which ones are... which materials go on which slots, basically. So let's go with matte white. Yeah, that works. Go back to our asset, and then go that. And you'll see that that's all edited. Now, once again, we didn't do the UV, so let's do a quick look at that. UV editing. And then, yeah. Done. Let's hide the warehouse, grab those, and export again. Now, in this case, because it's a different size than the warehouse, you would probably adjust the UV a bit to match what you want to. Metal won't be very important because you won't be able to tell the difference. But in that case, because you want to use one material, yeah, that's good. You sort of don't want to... You want the material count to be as low as possible. Like the 3 things that you want to be small in a WebGL space is poly count, material count, and texture size. If you can keep those low, you'll be pretty good. There's other things as well, but those are the main ones. If you're looking at your second space, those are the only things you have to worry about. There are, of course, many more, but we're not going to worry about that. Okay. So, next up, let's look at lighting. Now, for that, what we're going to do is we're going to do some light mapping. And because we've made our assets in Blender, we can do this. So we couldn't do this with the cube that we used last week. But we definitely can and definitely should do this with any assets that we're baking lights. So we've got 2 models. I'm going to go gallery, and I'm going to go into model on the tab here. Model. And then just go generate Lightmap UVs here. So let's pull that out a bit. And click on. Apply. Now what this does is allows Unity to do a second UV. So in Blender, we did 1 UV, and that's for the texture. Now imagine a second UV, and you can do it if you wanted to in Blender, if you were going to do custom UVs. But for, once again, second space, we're not going to worry about that. But it does a second one of these. So imagine having 2 UV pieces of information. And what happens is it will bake the light information into that second UV. So you can do some really nice stuff with that once that's done. So that's the first step of a few. Yeah. So there's definitely ways to optimize, and that is definitely one of them. It still has to process the polygons, but it definitely takes the file size down and things like that. So there's many different ways. Instancing will let Unity think smarter. So the really big spaces or the really complex spaces will take optimization techniques such as level of detail. Don't worry about it. Occlusion culling, also not important, for your second space. These are things you can do later if you want really complex optimized space. But way too high for a second space. Or even a fifth. But do know they do exist, and yeah, they are very useful in getting that frame rate up much higher. So, let's move on to light mapping. So, a few things we need. One, we need to generate Lightmap UVs if we're going to get Unity to do the lighting for us. We also need to select the objects that we want to have light baked onto. So in this case, we want our gallery to have a light map. Yeah. So very similar. It's basically prefabs in Blender, actually. So if I edit the first one, is it anyone or first one? Probably anyone if they're instances. So if I do that, that'll do that. Let's do this. Okay, so they're all linked. So that's that. And you can do the same in Unity with prefabs. So that's a super useful thing. Once again, wouldn't worry about it the first or second space. Third space, maybe? But yeah, prefabs are useful for creating assets in Unity that you edit one and then they all edit and update. There's a doc on that as well, but we're not going to worry about that today. This is the key thing there. Alrighty. Back to the point. So if you select the model, and then up here you have a static. So I'm going to click on that, and then go yes, change children, because this object has its children. Now the thing we're actually focusing on here is contribute GI. Now GI is global illumination. Occluder, batching, navigation, occlude, off mesh, these are all optimization things. Put them on anyway, it's fine. Reflection probe, this means that the reflection probe, if you do it, will include this asset when you bake it. So we want that as well. So a lot of the time, I'll just put on static and leave it at that. But in this case, the main one we're actually wanting is contribute GI. And then over here, we want the warehouse to have it as well. Now that doesn't have any children, so that didn't come up. Okay, so that's the model side of it. Next, we need some lights. So we've got our directional light. That should be the right way. Yeah, let's put them all on baked. Super optimized space. Because we want to sort of promote that. So, let's get some spotlights. Where's that one? Light. There we go. Spotlight light. So look at that. So in this case, we'll actually do a bit of a prefab example. So I'm going to put that maybe just there. I'm going to put that on important so I can sort of see the results. Let's put it over here so we can see it better. There we go. Let's go bigger angle. So maybe there. Move it down. Yeah, that's cool. And once again, we have three... where is it? I'm going to do 3 on this one. 5 is fine, maybe. But once again, like all of those images will be loaded at the start of a space. So that's like, was it 5 by lots? So that's 50, I think. So 50 images, and if each of those images are anything bigger than 5 meg, that's like, so let's say 10 meg each times 50, that's like 500 meg that it has to load at the start of the image, which is quite a lot of information. So Is that math right? Yeah. So when you're using canvases in a space, make sure they are small, because otherwise the load time will be like slow and it will slow down the space considerably. So be careful with your canvases. For that reason, I'm only going to make 3, I think. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a prefab. So it's got a thing here. It'll do that. So that when I duplicate this, it goes blue box. So when I duplicate this, let's go to kind of like the edge there. So that's good. Maybe there. Okay. So if I edit this one, so let's make it yellow, red. Let's make it red just to show. And then go overrides, apply all. All of the prefabs will do that. Another way to do it, if I just select this arrow, this will be sort of in the space. Let's make that blue. And then as soon as you edit it, because it's in the sort of like edit mode, it can change that. Yeah, that's the goal, especially with the second space. So as useful as all of your information is, and it really is, e.g. I learned from it, so thank you for that. Yeah, giving too much information for any user, doesn't matter what level you're at, even if you're an intermediate and you get like a new program that's like highly advanced, if you don't cover the basics well, like everything goes. So you have to be really careful with that. So I try, and fail sometimes, sure, but try to make it as obvious as possible and very clear. Because there's nothing worse than like losing interest because you're covering too much information too quick. So I'm doing a little bit more because this is the second verse. Control D, much more spotlights, and then going across here. Now you can't see that one because of the main light. So let's turn that one down a bit, actually. So let's go 0.2. 0.3. So you can see them. That's good. Let's go up and make sure those are sort of... No, I like it close up. Cool. All right. So we have the lights, and let's just duplicate those. And I can hopefully snap. Snap again is holding control. Maybe the one thing that most platforms have the same is the snap level. That's cool. I don't really want this so strong on the floor, so I'm just going to grab... I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Let's go that one. Let's go the range to a bit shorter. A bit deeper there. Subtle, nice. I think that's good. Yeah. Alright, cool. So yeah, prefab save a lot of time with assets that you want to be the same across the board. So that's useful. Now, one thing we need to do, notice how all these spotlights are currently set to real time. Let's go into this one again. I'm going to change this to baked. Done. Go back to scenes. And then when, as noted, you can see all of these, when I select them, are baked because I edited the prefab. So otherwise you could select them all, actually, if you wanted to, and pull that down. So if you do have different spotlights, sometimes, depending on the thing that you're tweaking, you can change them all at the same time. And things that are different will have a dash, so that's a useful thing that Unity does. Well, most programs do, to be honest. Okay, cool. What else? Now, directional light. So that one has shadows, and I'm also going to do one more, which is kind of like an ambient light. Now, I think, and this is interesting, I've just recently finished a space that like had this sort of one-sided thing, but it created the shadow. So I'm gonna do a test. But either way, let's do this. I'm gonna rename this one to directional shadow, and it has soft shadows. And then I'm gonna rename this one directional ambient. And the skybox also has its own light. So lighting is a whole playground of things that you need to do. So keep that in mind. But I think that's because I want the light to come sort of through there. So we'll give it a shot. 0.3, 0.3. Let's go 0.1 on that one. And 0.1 on that one. Okay, cool. So let's have a look. Our lights are set to baked. Our assets are set to static. We don't have colliders yet. I'm going to do the light mapping later, like the actual lighting, because the stream goes a bit funny because it takes a lot of processing. So I'll do that later. In this case, let's do some colliders. So this has a collider, but I'm going to get rid of that because we have a floor. And you'll notice that the gizmos on the spawn point and the portal disappear because there's nothing to land on. Now, the easy approach, which you could do, I suppose, because these are very simple assets, is create a mesh collider. So if you go down to add component and go mesh collider, they go green and blue, which is great. Let's move this guy over here. But on a complex space, and also assets that are curved, because you'll have a lot of polygons there, each of those polygons will be checked for mesh colliders, which is quite processor intensive, depending on the asset. So I don't recommend using mesh colliders unless you have no choice. And even then, I would go back to Blender and make a simple, a much more simple low polygon, because you don't see it. So there's that. But what I do a lot of the time is create an empty, and then I will just do a colliders bunch of assets. So this allows me to have a bit more control and kind of create a separate ecosystem for things that I can run on in colliding, so walls and stuff like that, but also the model that looks as good as I want it to within reason. So for box colliders, we just go add a collider or a floor or game object. It can actually be on the main ones as well, but I usually keep them separate. Up to you. Go add component, type in box, and go box collider. If you press F, you'll see this little green box down the bottom here. Let's go side view, and then click on the edit collider here. You have to select the dots. If you don't, it'll just disappear, which is a little annoying. So do that. Scroll that down to the floor. All the way across here. Bit of overlap over the edges. And you'll notice as soon as I go under, that spawn point will go green because it has something to land on. Now, if any of the spawn points, portals, all of those are in a collider, they will also go red. So I do recommend grabbing your spawn point, moving it up off the ground a little bit. And same with the portals one. So just make sure that they won't sort of spawn under and then fall. They'll spawn in the space and then fall a little bit. And that'll be very neat. So that's the floor. Now, if I wanted to, let's do this. I'm going to duplicate this. So copy component and then go paste a component as new. We have a new box. And then I will just move that one around. Now, in 2022, this didn't happen in 2019. whatever the last version was, each collider had, what do you call it? Edit collider box. Now it's just the top one. So that's kind of an interesting thing there. Actually, this is interesting. I wouldn't need to. Like, I could finish there. I just don't want people to fly out. So if we ever add flying, I don't want people to fly out of this space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that one. And I'm going to make a new prefab. Unless they've... Yeah. Now, the reason I'm going to do a new one is because you can't rotate the box collider component. But you can rotate a game object. So, actually, because I've already got that to the right size, I'm just going to go Control D, so it's already made, and then go ceiling. Go this way. So when I rotate this object, the ceiling object, the collider is also rotated. So that's one way to rotate box colliders as needed. No one's flying out of this guy. I'm going to do it down a little bit. There. Okay, cool. And then another one. And just go walls. All the way up. I'm going to push it in the wall a little bit because you do get some overlap with VRMs and whatnot, depending on the VRM. So I'm actually going to push it in the wall a little bit, just so that doesn't happen as much. So about there, that's cool. Copy, paste as new. Cool. Now, one thing I will do sometimes, up to you. So, for example, we've got these two. I could duplicate that one. Control D. Go up top. And then just rotate that. Just saves a bit of time with those edits, if you will. So, once again, in a little bit. Bigger. Bigger. Pretty thick. Done. That way also, when you select colliders, it actually shows you like the collision of the space, which is pretty good. So there's that. Now, just as a quick overview of a mesh collider. So say, for example, I put a mesh collider on this asset. Like so. So this cube is the mesh here, right? Not the model, let's say. So I'm getting very specific. A lot of these get interchanged a lot. So model and a mesh, all the sort of same things. But sometimes when you're getting to the detail, they are different. So I call this one a model and this one a mesh. So if you go here, and cube, you would have to, say you made a more optimized one, you would actually drag this one into here. Because if you drag this one, it doesn't actually work. So if you do that, that's how you do that. We're not going to, super optimized, but that's how you can do it if you want to. All right. Done? So that's our colliders. Cool. Canvases, I guess? Well, we did canvases last week. So we'll see how we go with the light mapping time and see how much, like for reasons I have to finish at 1 today. So yeah, let's do all of the things we haven't done already, and if we get time, we'll put them back in. So that's cool. On that, I would like to add light probes. So under light, we have light probes. These 4 dots. We're going to make more. That is a different... Yeah, that is a different method. Streaming is a whole setup with live peer and all the rest of it. I wouldn't be able to do that in quickly. That would be different, but I'll put that down as something that we could do. So... So I'm going to do light probes. Now, overview of light probes. So, how do you do this quickly? So, you can't really. Light maps are baked light. And because it's baked into a texture, it doesn't move. It doesn't update. It looks better. It's more performant. So, that's like we recommend using light mapping for really nice lighting. The catch is things like avatars who do move, or animated objects, which also move, that information will not be put into that light map texture. So things like avatars or animated objects that are not set to static will not be lit correctly because it's using other information. The light probe is that other information, if that makes sense. So what happens, once again, this is a more performant approach to creating a WebGL space. So when you light map the lighting information, each of these little dots are going to take the light in that location, so sort of intensity and color, things like that, and apply it to the dynamic objects, like avatars and animated objects. So as you can see here, I'm putting sort of dots at the top or at the ends of the space, which is not really enough information because we have some more light in here. We have the shadow on the windows and things like that. So one approach, we do have it. I usually do it manually, but there is also this light probe generator. So let's give it a shot. So with the Mono library, go to the tools, go to Light Probe Generator. This comes up when you go download, go import. And I'm going to remove this just to show you how to use the Light Probe Generator. So make a Light Probe group, or let's just do Light Probes, so a game object. Let's go Light Probe Generator, like so. Yeah. You'll have a big blue box around the space. Use these to sort of adjust to your space. So let's go there and there. Move it up a bit. Go this way, a little bit down. There we go. So what's going to happen is this light probe generator will create light probes in this box. You can add more than one, up to you. It's just a quick way to do it. So these are all the settings that you can do for it to sort of figure out things out. I'm just going to go generate. And it sort of takes in the light and the objects and things like that. If you want to optimize that a bit, you can go merge distance and just go optimize. And then anything within a 1 meter radius will sort of do that. And things like that. So that gives you a good start. And if you wanted to, you could sort of grab all of these. Oops. Once again, you have to make sure that you got edit light probe positions on. And then adjust them as needed. So Control D. And then you've got that sort of thing. So it depends on if you want to do it manually or using Light Probe Generator. Completely up to you. A lot of things I like to do sort of manually, But that said, I'm going to use the start of what it gave me. So I'm just going to sort of move them up. Move them down. And then kind of just duplicate all the way across. So you can kind of just like make a mix of tools, manual work, whatever's fastest, whatever works that you're comfortable with. I'm a bit of a optimization nut, so I'll spend a lot more time than probably needed, really, depending on the space. So I'm going to move them across a little bit more. Same with these ones. Like so. Alright, so the light in each of these sections will be adjusted as needed. Now, if you had, say, for example, these were red lights and these were blue, I might add a bit more light around here. So some really close to the light and some as the light changes. And then when the character runs between those two lights, that will blend between the two positions. So that's light probes. So when my avatar runs around this space, it will look like it's lit like the light mapping. It doesn't do the shadows and all the rest of it, but it does kind of make your avatar look like it's part of the space. And if you don't use light probes, it sometimes looks quite different. So if doing light mapping, I highly recommend adding light probes as well. So we've got that. Once the light probe generator is done, you can actually remove it if you want to, just to keep it clean. So I'm going to put the light probes in the lights category because I kind of keep things separate that way. All right. So our object has generate Lightmap UVs and are static. We have lights that also have baked. Our two things. I'm going to make the shadow real time. 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 if you're very good at optimization. Keep your real-time lights as small as possible. 1 to 3 is recommended because shadows are very processor intensive. They're kind of important to sort of embed your assets like characters into the space, but they are performance. So you'll lose frames depending on how many real-time lights you have. So I usually keep it to 1, sort of one directional light, maybe at the top, and fake a few things. Game development is all about faking things. So we'll do that. Now, the one thing I'm worried about, and Moody, tell me if you know the answer to this, because the last space kind of made things confused for me, because I don't know if one-sided polygons, e.g. everything is facing inside, will cast a shadow. It kind of did, but it was based on the skybox, so I'm not too sure. So I'm going to have to do a bake, see if it works, and if it doesn't, we'll take it from there. Now, the light probes, for some reason lately, add this flaw, which I'm not a big fan of. So you can go into here, I'm hoping, and turn off any of the sort of features. I think this is a nav mesh. Nope. None of those. Which one is it? Light probe group? Yeah. Light volume? No. Light? Nope. I don't know what that is. Anyway. That's a 2022 thing. I don't know what it is, to be honest. This button here can actually turn off all the gizmos, all of them. So that is a gizmo of some sort, so it's in there somewhere. Just not sure where. So I'm just going to turn them all off. Yep. Bye. Okay. So I'm going to do a bake. I'm going to go... Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. And that's the thing. Oh, that's a good point. Is there a directional thing that allows me to... No. Render on both sides, because that'd be quite useful. Maybe not. So I'm going to do a test. I'll jump in the text chat for a bit while we do that. But the last thing for lighting, or light mapping, is setting it up. So this is in the lighting panel, which can be found in Windows lighting. Where is it? Rendering. So that one there. Click on that if it's not there. I don't think the default setting has it. We need a new light setting. So let's go new. And it's going to put it there. I'm going to put it in... I'm going to name it myself. So let's go warehouse lighting. And then I'm going to grab and put that in the assets just to keep everything where I want it. That's fine. Close, close, close. Like so. So that's there. Light settings. Lighting or light? Light. These two. Lighting. Ah, these ones. Okay. Oh, maybe that's it. Right. So different lighting modes do different lighting things. You have to get very technical with what's what. I'm not going to worry about it too much. But what did I set it on? Maybe shadow mask. Not too sure. Let's have a look at some of the settings. So we have progressive GPU. So it uses the GPU to bake it, or CPU. Up to you. GPU is a bit faster, but usually not as good. Depends on the bake, I guess. So there's that. For the first bake, I will usually reduce these by a quarter. So let's go to 128. Let's go to 128. Leave that, leave that. Filtering, I'll leave to auto. Light map resolution, on such a simple space, I'll probably punch that up to 80. I personally put this up to 2048, but it depends on you and your needs, so up to you. I'll leave that at high quality. I do put ambient occlusion on. Usually put that to non-directional, so that includes normal maps, I think. Some of these, if you roll over the thing, it actually tells you a bit more about them. Depending on the thing, it may be useful, it may be not. So it depends on the situation. And I'll usually use these to medium. And then I will put all of these back up significantly for the final bake. So this is sort of a read on how the lighting is, and this is faster. So reduce everything, do the bake. If you like the lighting, then put everything back up. So these are my usual settings when I start. So I think that's it. Static. Light map sets baked, lighting, light probes are added, and generate. Okay. Done. So that was about 5 minutes-ish. And it looks like it is taking into consideration the light here. So that's great. But as you can see, it does sort of like, it's not bright enough. So we can do that. Now, so let's do some things here. Let's turn ambient up to, let's say, 0.5. Now, the catch with that is you sort of have not much light over here. So it's kind of interesting to try and figure out, okay, ambient light versus shadow light versus, like, what do you call it, detail light. And I'm not going to spend much time with this, because technically you have the skills to do what you want to. But, yeah, I might do one more bake with the ambient light being significantly higher, I think. So this wall and this wall would be pretty dark, but that's maybe fine. And you get bounce light as well. So, sort of elements with that. I could sort of grab, and I might do it actually, because we only have so much light going into the space, so it's actually quite dark. So creating ambient light is really an interesting challenge, part of it. So I'm going to do, let's say 0.4. Yeah, so I could do that, but I'm going to cheat, because I like cheating. Let's go up to these there, grab that, duplicate that, put it up here, and then rotate that. Now, direct light is flat light, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm going to put that to 0.2, and then maybe point that to 0.6. These are both baked, which is what I want, and I want the shadow. I kind of want the shadow to just be in that. I think that's a kind of really subtle thing that I like with these sort of things. So the sunlight creates shadow. I could do it with other ones, but I kind of just want that. Once again, it kind of adds an effect, but also is more performant. So that's a win in my mind. The other approach is have maybe an ambient shadow. Actually, let's do that. So I'm going to bake that one. And then put this one down to, let's maybe point. Because the sun is going that way, so we should probably do that. So let's go 0.3. And then make this one 0.6. Yeah. We don't want shadows on that one. So no shadows on that ambient light. We do want shadows on this real-time light. And we want that to have shadows as well, because that's like the sunlight. Actually, no. Get rid of that one. Real-time soft shadows. No, that's going to be the bake. Okay, hang on. Messing about. Okay. We'll give that a shot. Move those up the top. Baked. That's going to be the sunlight. Soft shadows. That's going to be everywhere. Yeah. Let's show that. Yep, that's good. And then ambient will be the other way. At point, let's put that down a bit. With no shadows, so just general light. Okay, we'll give that a shot. Cool. Save. All right. Before one more bake, any questions? Because I'll probably end it after this bake, and then we'll run around. Let's move the portal. Put that in a more normal place. F to zoom in. Make sure that's above. That's good. Where can we put the spawn point? Let's get the spawn point over here. And I think last week we kind of rotated it that way. Make sure it's the one way. Yep, cool. Hide that again. All right, excellent. And yeah, thanks again for your help, Moody. Really good points in there. Cool. And the thing is, like, seeing this space, like, there's a lot less polygons, even though, like, once again, there weren't many polygons in last week's with the cubes. But because we have more control over UVs, because we can hide polygons on the other side of things, yeah, generally speaking, most spaces, most things will be made in an external app, such as Blender, Maya, 3D Studio Max, Revit, Rhino, all of them. And then imported like we've been doing for this session. We've also looked at light mapping and light probes, which work together. Reflection probe, just one, real quick. This takes no time, so I'm going to do that really. So under light we have reflection probe. We need our gizmos again. Now, reflection probe, once again, similar to light probes and light mapping, is a more performant way to do cool stuff. So the cool stuff in this case is reflections on everything. And because we don't have ray tracing yet, looking at WebGPU, this will kind of create, once again, a texture. And that texture will be reflected on objects, including, and this is really cool, the avatar. So I do recommend adding light probes. Once the catch with this, though, is each light probe can be quite big. So in this case, the resolution of this one is 128. So it's a 128 by 128 pixel image, which is very small. But if you had a very metallic, very polished, like mirror-like asset, that reflection probe would look very bad because the pixels are too small. So it would be very pixelated and not so great. So in that case, the best way to get around that is actually to look at your materials. So we got, let's say, steel is a bit more obvious. So we're using metallics. So let's go with the matte white, actually. So if we put everything up here, you can actually see the mirror. But if that sky was a 128 by 128 pixel image, it would be very jagged. One way around that is to sort of reduce the metallic a little bit, but definitely the polished, so it gets blurry. And that way, the resolution of the reflection probe is less important, so you can reduce the size, which is reducing the file size of the whole space. So both light maps, and you can check those here. If you go to lighting, baked light maps, you can sort of see the size of that. So that's a 2048 by 2048. Same with this one, 2048 by 2048. And Unity is okay at it. So, and it's fine. For most people, it's fine. But if you want, once again, optimize spaces to use all of this space, you would probably make a custom light map. Another project for a third or fourth space, if you will. So we've got that. So yeah, so let's go back to our reflection probe. First thing you need to do is put the box where any object in this space will reflect this reflection probe. Yes, crunch compression as well. And we can look at that as well. So anything within this box will reflect this. So if I wanted to, I could sort of put a reflection probe over here. Put the location of where it reflects here, and then have two or one per line. But once again, each one is 2048 by 2048, which is quite a lot. So just be careful with balancing texture size, quality, etc., etc. Always the challenge. So for this space, I'm just going to do one and make sure all my textures are kind of like no more than 0.8 on the polished mark. Metallic, less important. But a little bit, so it depends on what kind of effect you're going for. So let's go down to, this is meant to be a matte, so I'm just going to make it a matte and put that down to 0. So that's fine. But metal and things like that all adjusts as needed. So with a reflection probe added, once again, baked, you don't want real time. Do not do that in a WebGL space. It's very expensive. You can if you're really good at optimization, maybe, but I wouldn't recommend it. Frames, like you want kind of 60 to 80 frames if you can for any one. And if once VR gets added, and this is a very, very important point, once VR and mobile get added, your spaces have to be a lot more performant than many of the current spaces that are on desktop. A desktop with a 2070 RTX and like good CPU and lots of RAM can do like a space much faster than a Quest 2 or a mobile phone, for example. So in Mona, we give builders the choice to make the spaces for their target platform, but you will have to be very optimized if you're creating a space for mobile or VR. And that's the thing, with spatial, they have very strict limits in regards to what you can and can't do. We take that away because we give you that power to create whatever you want at the moment. But VR and mobiles do require very optimized spaces. So keep that in mind when that gets added, or you're making a space for multiple different spaces or assets for GLBs that can be put into different spaces, things like that. Optimization is pretty key for a lot of Metaverse spaces and definitely WebGL spaces. Once WebGPU becomes a thing, that'll change the numbers a bit. So yeah, so that's that. Now, we've already done one light map, so we can do a bake and it won't take everything into consideration. So I'm going to move the ball up a bit just so it gets a more general overview. I'm going to move that up to maybe 256 and just go bake. And then you have this, for example. Now, the reason that's black is because... Why? Because... Interesting. Not too sure. But you get the idea. Actually, it might be better because all of the spaces have that on both sides. So I'm actually going to just move this over there, because that'll actually be more accurate with the things around it. Because if you're walking here, it'll kind of look the same. So if we go bake, yeah, that's better. Cool. So that's reflection probes. So with light mapping, light probes for lighting dynamic objects, and reflection probes to offer reflection objects on textures that have metallic and smoothness, you can get some really cool effects with all of that and be optimized. Crunch compression, which Moody was talking about, is down here. If you click on an asset, like your textures, for example, so these are 2048 and these are 2.7 meg, which is quite big. Down here, you have crunch compression. So if you put that on and go apply, that will reduce the file size quite a bit. When you open the space, it will slow things down because it has to kind of uncompress it. But yeah, that is one way. Once you're done with everything, put crunch compression on most of your textures, and that's a really good way to get the file size down. I believe, and Moody, feel free to tell me if this is incorrect, the end result, once it's loaded in the space, I think the file size is still the same. So the VRAM, so the virtual RAM of the space will still be used with 2.7 meg, say? Not too sure. But the download speed will be much faster because the file size is much smaller. Another very useful thing, and I think I covered this in the first one, you can adjust the size of your textures in Unity. And this will be taken into consideration when building the playground files and whatnot. The mintable files, however, will take the original texture in file size. So there's that. But say, for example, I could get this down to 1024. And a good thing to check, just as a quick overview before one more bake, is, so let's have a really close look at the texture. So I've got that. If I go apply, you'll get a little bit of fuzziness, but to be honest, it didn't make much of a difference. And this is 0.7 meg, which is great. Let's do the same with concrete. So let's put this down to 1024 and see what changes. Not too bad. And that's also much smaller. So this is a really good technique for sort of optimizing your assets, is sort of find the asset that you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at this metal. Go apply and see if it changes. And it kind of doesn't. So that saves a fair bit of size. This one I'm going to put down to 512 actually, because it's pretty basic. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the, which one is it? Filter mode to no filter. And that way it doesn't do blurring between colors. So case by case. Yes. File size is a huge thing, and a lot of first builders will come into that as one of the first problems they have, is why is my space too big? Is because, like, let's say all of your textures are 4096 by 4096, and you have 100 of them, gets real quick. So, that said, and I think I covered this last week, the best thing to do, apart from the skybox, is make sure that none of your textures are over 2000 by 2048 by 2048. And then adjust down from that in Unity. So, yeah. File size is 100% important. Okay, done. So if you had the time, you could go into all of your textures, adjust as needed. If it modifies it too much, or you think the quality of it is reduced too much, then put it back up. You can do that, no problems. Okay. So let's do one more bake, and then do a quick test, shall we? Bake. Where's that? Here. Hopefully this works. If it doesn't, you'll understand why. I'm out of time. But we'll give it a shot. Generate Lightmap UVs. Now, once again, I would update all these, but we've changed the lighting a fair bit, so I'm just going to do a quick one as well. Okay, so the lighting's much better now. It's a little bit brighter. I'd probably want it a little bit more brighter than this, but that's fine. Okay, let's add some quick canvases. So once again, all of your assets need to be under these 3 objects. So if you close them all, this is what you see. So canvas 1, I'm going to... Yeah, well, that's fine. Moved across here. Have to zoom in. How fast can I completely populate a whole space? I kind of don't want to cover. I kind of want to do this kind of thing because that's kind of cool. I like that actually. Now what this also needs... oops. Nope. That one. What I'm going to do is if anyone has like a landscape, and usually landscapes are like at... Actually... like 16.9. So I'm going to do that just quickly. So 0.16, 0.09. And then scale that up. So if someone wants to, you could have sort of like, maybe a bit smaller. So the bounds of a canvas are as big as the bounds of this. So if you had a wide image, you could actually put it there, which would be kind of cool. So let's put that kind of in the middle of those two. And this one we could put in the middle of those two. So those aren't the right level, but that's fine. Yeah. So if I did a portrait and used the setting that scales the thing down, it would be like sort of tall like that in the middle. But if you did a wide one, you could sort of do it there. So like I don't mind that approach to it. So I might just keep doing that. I'm going to rename the canvas. One, and let's do this one as gallery 2, I guess. Cool. Yeah, let's quickly do it. Actually, I'm gonna rotate these two, put them on the wall. Real close, like about there. Make sure it doesn't like do any Z fighting or clipping, which that doesn't, so that's good. Yeah, and as Moody pointed out, like less canvases is better. So it would be better to have less that show them really well, than more that sort of slows down the space on the start and all that sort of stuff. You can only have like one real-time streaming, and also note that streaming does cost a lot because of how Unity handles information. A live stream space or a live stream canvas will reduce your frame rate down significantly, like 30-40 frames, regardless of how simple the space is, because it's feeding in information into the space very quickly. So your space needs to be very performant if you want a good live stream space. So that's kind of cool. All right. Done. Just a quick summary of what Moody was talking about in regards to frames. If I put some assets in here, so let's put a 3D object. So let's imagine for a second that this was a frame, like a really cool frame. And I'm gonna try see if the prefab actually works on this. So let's put that sort of down a bit, forward a bit. So like that. So imagine that was a frame. that would sort of embed the canvas in the space more. Note that if someone adjusts the, like does automatic scaling to the picture, the frame does not change this file size. So it's very much a case by case in how you're planning on using frames and canvases in the space. But say, for example, we had this asset down here, and just to be cool, why? That's weird. Okay, cancel that. So if someone used the scale canvas to scale canvas to image, then and it was a portrait, then the two sides of the canvas would shrink, but the two things at the top would not. So just keep that in mind. So if you have images that are always going to be the same size, so you use the crop version, then that would work on this. But yeah, so there's some notes to make with frames. But with these in a gallery, you'd probably not want frames on the grounds that you want to give artists the control of if they want a portrait, if they want a landscape, that sort of thing. So very much case by case. All right, I think that's done. Let's give it a shot. So make sure you press save before pressing playground. There is an issue. That's a label. So as noted, all of these objects here with the canvas tag, not the artifact layer or anything like that, the canvas tag needs to have a unique name. So I'm going to have to quickly go through all of these and rename them. 3. Yeah, so frames work on fixed size canvases. But if you're sort of opening it up to the artist's work, then I'd probably recommend against it, or come up with a design that kind of allows both. I highly recommend naming your portals and your canvases with things that are actually useful. So if there's canvases like in a particular area of the establishment, then I would put that. So for example, gallery 1_1, for example, gallery 2_1, because if you sell your space, so if you mint and sell your space, you want the owner to understand what's going on. So just a heads up on that. Same with portals. If you just have unique portal, it doesn't really do anything. And that doesn't help. So if you have an entrance, if you have an exit, if you have a, like, please spawn here, like, be good with your naming so that the owners have an easier time of it. Because I can pretty much guarantee many of them are not as well versed in game assets and that sort of thing. So make it easy for them, and they will love you for it. Saving, playground, no problems. Okay, so when you go playground, once again, the Explorer or the window that has the export folder here, which is in your space. So this is the project file. Go to exports, go to the playground files here, and the window should come up. Drag and drop. Embiggen. Now playground, if you click on a canvas, it will load you at... so I'm just going to go tab. Okay. Interesting point. If you do tab, I think you get point at the 0, 0, maybe the spawn point. So I'm going to just move the space a little bit so that 0, 0, 0 isn't in a wall. Like so. Okay. You get the idea. So I'm going to have to do that. Oh, no. Why? Ah. There we go. So I'm just going to make 0, 0, 0 acceptable. And that might be just a playground thing, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But I'm going to do it. Now, the reason that happens is when you click on a canvas in the playground, you get respawned. In Mona, it doesn't do that. So I'm just going to walk around a bit. There we go. Like so. Interesting. I don't know why that does that. So don't worry about that too much. But if you find that your playground files don't update for some reason, so you've done something and it doesn't look like it's in it, usually save does it, but sometimes you might need to just delete the originals. So there's that approach as well. There we go. All right, so we have our space. We didn't put colliders on the walls, so I'd need to do that. That's pretty easy, actually. But yeah, we have our space. And this one, if you press page up, it gives you the frame rate. So we're looking at very fast frame rate for this space. So that is using by pressing page up will give you this information. The only one I really focus on is the frame rate. Like, you need that to be good. So we got that. So yeah, we have our space. Done and done. Okay. So that's the whole space in like an hour, like 2 hours to be honest. 2.5 because I did do the skybox and the materials last session. That said, also teaching a lot of the assets or elements takes a bit of time as well. So this space may have been made in like an hour. But that also depends on your understanding and knowledge of both Mona, Unity, and Blender, or whichever 3D asset tool you're making. So yeah, that said, we've made a space. Let me try something. I just want to see something. So the shadow's there, it's just very subtle. You kind of see it. So there's that. All right. That said, all of the things we've looked at in these couple of hours, like the beginning, you would spend, of course, a lot of time like cleaning up the lighting, adding colliders where you need them to be, stuff like that, and all of the polish as well. So there's definitely a balance between sort of the way I look at it nowadays is basically a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary pass. So the primary is all you sort of like when you're drawing sketching something, you'll do your basic shapes. So you do your circles and your rough shapes, and then I'll do that. And then the secondary is sort of your intermediate detail. So I'll add that sort of thing. And then the tertiary is like the polish. So making everything sort of clean and stuff, like elements of that. I find that a really good way to build a space. One, because you start getting the feel for how the space or the stage or the level plays out. And in many cases, navigating a space is as much a part of designing a space than how it looks. So say, for example, creating a flow or maybe understanding in the early stages that you might need some guides to help people, like using color and contrast. There's a whole degree of information that allows you to make better spaces. And that comes with time or a degree. So there's a lot of content in YouTube, in our docs, Reddit, like you name it. The amount of resources that we have access to that are free and accessible is considerable in comparison to like even 10 years ago. And here at Moto, we very much lean into that and hope that a lot of our assets help you. But of course, if you have any issues, feel free to jump into Discord, in support, tech, general, say what you're working on, show us your stuff. And yeah, it'll be good to see anyone who jumps in there, and we can help chat, discourse, and have learning lessons in both directions. Once again, there were some things that Moody said is like I didn't even know. That instantiate prefab thing from Blender is a huge thing, so I'm very happy about that one. So yeah, that's it. So we've done our first space only in Unity. We've done our second space in Blender and Unity. We've also looked at light mapping, light probes, a very quick reflection probe, and done. Excellent. Let's wrap it up there. Thanks for joining. And if there's any other questions, happy building. Trying to finish on a cool note. Robot, clearly. Yeah. We're gonna fix that one. That's cool animation though. I just need to fix the feet. Cool. Alright, see you.